There's so many things about this case that are so hard to put together. Veteran police officers who arrived at the scene said it was one of the most horrific and gruesome scenes that they had ever seen. Yet somehow there were two roommates who were in the house who apparently didn't hear anything.
Anybody who might have knowledge is considered persons of interest at this point.
Everything that guy just said is bullshit. Thank you.
Like you, be strong to hold the powers of the sun.
All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
Let's listen to Pavarotti.
Can I be your superhero?
Hello, welcome to The Revealing. I'm your host, Pavarotti, and I'm here to discuss the Idaho 4 case. And in this episode, we will clear up more confusion, and I will prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that Bryan Kohberger never returned to the King Road residence the morning after the atrocity. But I will show you exactly what actually happened based on facts, court record, video, PCA. It's unequivocal. And you know, some of this stuff is like taking candy from a baby for me. I don't know why it's so difficult for everybody else. But once we start to gain knowledge into certain aspects of this case, then it starts to become clear what is taking place. In fact, I did a video the other day and I started to really pull back the veil on some real things that took place in this atrocity. And in a video I'm going to do here in just a little bit, I'm going to further pull back that veil on actual events that took place. But in this one, I've got to clear up the confusion because, again, what they're trying to do is take a piece of a puzzle and they've got a slot that they need to put that piece in, but it just doesn't quite fit. It almost does. So instead of putting it in the proper slot, they're jamming it in again. Almost everything that you see in this case almost fits, doesn't it? Yet it just doesn't quite fit all the way. And I wonder why that is. Well, there are some striking circumstances that could only be as striking as they are if some of them were planned that way. So I'm beginning to get a real picture of what's going on in this case. And I'm going to start sharing that real picture that I'm getting with you. But in this one, let's go ahead and debunk the notion that Bryan Kohberger, the morning after the atrocity, returned to the King Road residence, because we know that they suggest that his cellular phone was using cellular resources that provided coverage to the King Road residence. And I agree. He was probably using cellular resources that provided coverage to the King Road residence. But that in no way means that he went to the King Road residence. In fact, it was impossible for him to, and I'll show you. Get ready. First, let's establish a timeline based on law enforcement's own statements. And this is out of their original probable cause affidavit, and it says, further review indicated that the 8458 phone utilized cellular resources on November 13, 2022 that are consistent with the 8458 phone leaving the area of the Kohberger residence at approximately 9 a.m. So we've got a timeline. And traveling to Moscow, Idaho. Specifically, the 8458 phone utilized cellular resources that would provide coverage to the King Road residence between 9:12 a.m. and 9:21 a.m. The phone next utilized cellular resources that are consistent with the 8458 phone traveling back to the area of the Kohberger residence and arriving at that area at approximately 9:32 a.m. So, from 9 to 9:32, they say Kohberger left his apartment, went to what they're claiming is the residence, and then returned to his apartment. Now that's actually a trip with a little bit of distance in between, so it wouldn't leave very much time for Kohberger to spend much time at the King Road residence. But they're saying that between 9:12 and 9:21 that he was using that cellular coverage. Well, that cellular coverage must be pretty big. But we've established a timeline. He leaves his apartment at 9, returns at 9:32. What happens in between? Well, allow me to share it with you. Now, it's amazing to me that every aspect of this story is told through the eyes of law enforcement as sinister events. Everything that takes place is another sinister event in this story. Well, let's take this sinister event, pull back the veil, and expose it for what it really was. So now that we've established a timeline, we've got Kohberger leaving his apartment at approximately 9 a.m., then travels to Moscow. He uses cellular resources that provide coverage to the King Road residence between 9:12 and 9:21. And then he returns to his apartment at 9:32. Well, I contend that where Bryan Kohberger went from his apartment was exactly 10.9 miles one way. So that's 20.8 miles round trip. Now, to do 20.8 miles in 32 minutes, that doesn't leave a lot of time for what we call dilly-dally. So what happened when he was using these cellular resources in this 20.8 mile round trip? Let me show you. On the night of the atrocity, I've mapped Mr. Kohberger's movements from the time he had left his apartment, traveled to Wawawe Park, and then traveled back a different route to his apartment in Pullman. And you can see it represented on the map here. Over here is the King Road residence, Moscow, Idaho, where the atrocity took place. As you can see, Kohberger never went that way. But the next morning he did, in fact, go that way. And he traveled straight across Highway 270 into Moscow and went to a location that was near the King Road residence. And you can see that 10.9 miles, according to Google Maps, is 19 minutes one way. So Kohberger must have been driving pretty fast, because if you do the same in a return trip, it would take him 38 minutes to go from his apartment to where he went and back. They're saying he did it in 32 minutes. So again, it didn't leave much time for dilly-dally, and Kohberger must have been stepping on the gas to make it happen that fast. But where did he go in Moscow? Again, we'll see a closer map of the fastest route to where he went. And again, I'll show you the 19 minutes where he went in Moscow to the Washington Trust Bank, where he removed money from an ATM machine. And then he traveled directly back to his residence. Let me prove it. Again, the PCA says from 9 a.m. to 9:32, he left his apartment and he returned. He used cellular resources that provide coverage to the King Road residence between 9:12 and 9:21. Where did he go? He went right here, as I showed you in some videos a while back, to this Washington Trust Bank. And he went to this ATM machine right here and he withdrew funds. As you can see in the state's response to the defense's motion in limine to limit to deny the self-authentication of records, it says Washington Trust Bank records for Mr. Kohberger. There is an Excel spreadsheet of transactions and PDG documents of images of Mr. Kohberger in his car at the ATM on the morning of 11/13/22. He went directly to this bank, removed funds from this ATM machine, and then he went directly back to his apartment. And we know that because if he had headed to the King Road residence, he would have passed one of those many cameras that they suggest that they caught him on the night before. And you can bet that they would list every one of those camera sightings in their documents because they listed every other camera sighting of his movements the night before and the very next day. So we know he didn't go to the King Road residence. He went right here to this ATM machine and he went back home. Now, the question is, did he do this on his own accord? Or was he coerced into meeting somebody in Moscow? We know, excuse me, we know that after he retrieved his money and he went back home to his apartment, that he then took a shower and he got dressed and prepared for the next day. And then he took a picture right here that everybody is passing around the internet. Now, the thing that they crop out of the picture when they pass it around is this clear outline of Bryan Kohberger's shower curtain. And let me tell you, folks, the reason this is cropped out is not because it's incriminating to Bryan Kohberger, as I will prove here in just a minute. They crop it out because it was suggested that on the night of the atrocity, he removed his shower curtain, placed it in his car, and that is how he was able to keep all of the evidence from the crime getting into his car, because he had put his shower curtain down to pick up any of the evidence. That is obviously not the case when you see at 10:31 when this picture was taken, and let's verify that. You can see in the state's response to the defense's motion in limine to limit the bushy eyebrows, right here, photograph taken by Bryan Kohberger on November 13, 2022 at 10:31 a.m. showing his eyebrows. So this photo was taken at 10:31 a.m. after he made that trip to the bank and returned to his apartment and got dressed. Now, that means he did not remove his shower curtain and use it as some kind of shield to protect his car from DNA evidence. It's clearly hanging in his shower. And let me also point this out. These mainstream morons that keep pointing to Bryan Kohberger's white knuckles as evidence of him punching somebody has never hit anything in their entire life. Because let me tell you, when you punch somebody, your knuckles do not turn white, they turn red. And trust me on this one. But here's what I see when I look at this picture. Because you see, when your knuckles go white like this, that means you're severely dehydrated and your blood is thin. And when you look at the pale color of Mr. Kohberger, the fact that he has thin blood from being dehydrated, his pasty looking skin, not to mention he has an oily look, even though he obviously just got out of the shower. These are all the classic signs of Mr. Kohberger using stimulant substances. You can see how his face is drawn in, it's pasty. These knuckles, when they turn white, these are all classic signs of stimulant use. So, what happened? He went to the ATM machine over there. Why? In my humble opinion, he went over there because he was told to go over there to meet somebody. He retrieved money and he purchased him something to get him through the rest of his weekend, went back home, took a shower, got dressed, and this is him about to go and do whatever he had planned on doing that weekend, and it has absolutely nothing to do with a quadruple unaliving that happened the night before. Well, then how do you explain his shower curtain not being there when they searched his apartment then, Pavarotti? I don't have to explain it. Let me let the professionals do it, because psychologists can do it a lot better than me, and they're certainly more qualified. You see, Mr. Kohberger has also been diagnosed with severe obsessive compulsive disorder, as we have suggested that he possibly has had in the past, OCD. And his doctors say that OCD can be an independent diagnosis, but is also a set of symptomatic behaviors that are often comorbid in autism spectrum disorder, as with Mr. Kohberger's autism spectrum disorder. Notable, for example, on the above NIMH list of behavioral issues commonly associated with autism spectrum disorder, Mr. Kohberger has sleep difficulties and subsequently developed a habit of night driving or running to decompress, such behaviors being present most of his life. He also engages in frequent compulsive hand washing, wears gloves to avoid germs, and has a fear of things getting into his eyes. Changes his shower curtain frequently to avoid exposure to mold, and avoids anything he views as contaminating. If the state elicits testimony at trial related to these types of facts that are used to build circumstantially the elements of the crime, or show Mr. Kohberger's actions as reflecting his state of mind or other elements of the crime, he will refute that evidence through expert testimony as behaviors related to his obsessive compulsive disorder and his autism spectrum disorder. So he changes his shower curtain frequently because he wants to avoid exposure to mold, and he avoids anything he views as contaminating. So, no, his shower curtain wasn't used to cover up his car for DNA evidence, as clearly seen in this photo right here after the atrocity, and it wasn't still hanging in his shower when law enforcement raided his apartment, because he gets rid of it periodically because he thinks it's going to mold and get on him because he's obsessive compulsive. Give me a break, folks. This BS circumstantial stuff that they're trying to use to paint a picture, anybody with a nose could smell this BS. So in conclusion, although everything has been conditioned for you to believe things a certain way, it turns out that conditioning is likely intentional. There is irrefutable evidence that I provided you in this video that Bryan Kohberger never made a return trip to the King Road residence, and it's quite impossible to make a return trip when you never made the initial trip, but he certainly never made a return trip because it was impossible due to time restraints. We know now he left his apartment, went straight over to that Washington bank, retrieved money from the ATM, and then directly headed back because time would not allow anything else to happen. He never went to the King Road residence because there is no video of him actually going there that morning, and based on the fact that law enforcement has provided video evidence of every other movement they could, they would have in fact provided video evidence of that. So no, he went to the ATM. They paint the picture that he made a return trip because it fits their narrative. It fits their jigsaw puzzle. It fits the little slot they try to put it in, but it don't quite fit though, does it? Nope, they forced in another piece. Which leads me to my real question in this. And you know, I don't like to provide questions often unless I really have an answer to it, but I really don't have an answer to this one. The real question is, why are people so oblivious to facts when you present them to them? Is it because they're dense? Is it because they want to block out those facts for some reason? Or is it because they've been conditioned for 2.5 years now to believe a certain way? And when they're presented with facts at this point, it doesn't matter to them because they're going to be blind to the facts you present to them because they've already made up their mind due to the massive mainstream moron campaign to make their mind up for them. That's the only thing I can come to a conclusion on at this point, because I will do videos where I present nothing more than fact after fact after fact, and I still get people in my comments saying, why are you spreading these lies? Lies? I just pointed out everything in documents. How is it a lie when I point out these states' documents? It can only be guilter blocks, POV blocks, or just wishful thinking. In the end, people want to believe that this crime, for some reason, was committed by a one-off Ted Bundy, even though everything goes against that BS narrative. But in their minds, they want to feel like they really got the right guy because it makes them feel safer about their little goings on in their life, knowing that law enforcement is out there getting all the bad guys. Well, I can assure you in this case, they're not out there getting all the bad guys because they're manipulating everything in this case to try to make it look like they got the bad guy. And that should tell you everything you need to know right there. But to really grasp all this, you have to really know the events that took place, because a lot of manipulation has gone into this entire narrative. And I am slowly ripping the veil back. And I have a video I will be bringing to you that will not only pull the veil back, it'll set that freaking thing on fire. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Post your comments, thoughts, criticisms. And until next time, Pavarotti's out.